Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. This is me, Joey P. Joe Pisapia, fresh back from a few days of vacation. Thanks, everybody, for holding it down for me. Shout out to Welsh and Worm hosting all the shows, while Joey P. got a little R&R, but not too much, because it's time to get right back into draft season. We got one full week of drafting remaining for you. So if you haven't already, make sure you download Draft Wizard. Make sure you're syncing all your leagues. Use the tools to make you smarter, to give you the best team you possibly can have, because you all know it's going to be quite an unexpected journey. Because we're talking about some nerd stuff. You see that little Hobbit reference there, Debro? Before the show, all the nerd stuff we talked about. That. Debro, by the way, here with us, Derek Brown, and from The Score, Justin Boone, celebrating over a decade at The Score. What do they get you there at The Score for your 10-year anniversary? Did they get you something nice there?
10-year, we had a huge dinner last year.
Nice.
You get extra vacation and stuff like that. There's a bunch of things. I just celebrated my 11th year this week, and I didn't even remember. The 10 is big. The 11, I got an email telling me, and that's the only reason I remembered that one. So
that's how it is with Debro's wife too. She's like, "We're still married.
Yeah.
We're still doing this." All right,
fine. I get a congratulatory text.
I was gonna say, do you get emails now? Is that what you got? Happy anniversary email, Debro? Is that what you get?
I'm still here.
Signals. We use carrier pigeons. We like to go old school.
Nice. All right. Well, today's topic is an important one, because every year we are always looking for the wide receivers in the rookie class that are going to break out. We've talked a lot about them over draft season. But there's also some young wide receivers who, for whatever reason, might not have popped in their rookie year. So some second-year guys, some third-year guys that I think can really make an impact this year. And we see it time and time again. Sometimes there's post-hype sleepers. Sometimes there's players that, for quarterback reasons, injury reasons, all sorts of different circumstances, have not realized their full potential yet on the fantasy scale. So the guys are going to identify a bunch of those players for everybody. Boone, you're our guest here, so I want you to go first. Let's talk about the rookies first, and then we'll get to the second and third year guys. Give me a rookie that you are buying in on this year that you think might even be still undervalued potentially when you look at the landscape of ADP.
I'm shocked that this guy's undervalued. Normally a show like this, we would never talk about this player. Malik Nabers. Someone at The Score told me like a few weeks ago that they got him in the 5th round of one of their drafts, and my jaw hit the floor. I was like, the 5th round? How is that even possible? I hadn't been paying attention to his ADP. I don't know why it was like 4th, 5th round. And there's some sites out there where you can still get him there. I mean, right now, his ADP, wide receiver 24, the 48th pick overall. If he is available there in your draft, knock everyone in your family over and hit that button and take him on your team. I have him as the wide receiver 16. I have him 24th overall in my top 250. I don't understand the huge difference between him and Marvin Harrison Jr. And maybe you guys can explain it to me, but Marvin Harrison Jr. has been going as a back-end wide receiver 1 for a lot of the preseason here in drafts. Malik Nabers, not that far off. And I get the situation a little bit different. People might be more excited about that Cardinals offense and the Giants. Well, they're the Giants and Daniel Jones, but it's not the kind of situation that we've seen Garrett Wilson deal with, where he had to have Zach Wilson and Trevor Siemian and those kind of quarterbacks. It's not the same situation that like Drake London has had the last couple of years with Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ridder. Like Daniel Jones is okay. He's not great. He's never going to be a good quarterback, but he's passable. And this offense is going to be all Malik Nabers. He is the identity of this offense. We saw him out there for a half in the preseason. And what happened? 4 catches, 54 yards. He had 6 targets. He had a 33% target share when the starting offense was out there in that game. That's what this season is going to be for him. All the volume that he can handle. The guy's an incredible player, an elite prospect. And we've heard out of Giants camp, all their practices, he's dominating. He is fantastic. So what is the big reason here why he's going so much later than Marvin Harrison in drafts? Do you guys have any idea? Can you explain
Daniel
it to
Jones. I think that's as simple as Daniel Jones.
Yeah, it's Giants stink.
And with a decent look, I think the lack of faith of Daniel Jones, we never seen him do that, which is make a wide receiver of any talent extraordinary in fantasy, which granted, he hasn't had that talent, so you could say it's a chicken and egg scenario, right, Debro? But I think it's Daniel Jones at the end of the day. That's the one reason. And I actually got my first share of Nabers yesterday in a draft in the 4th round. So what you're seeing is true. It's out there. But Debro, it's got to be the Daniel Jones things, right? I mean, what else can there be? It's not the talent.
Yeah. It's the stink of the Giants offense. That's all it is. And Daniel Jones. I mean, you could say the same thing, and we're not talking about running backs here, but it's just been the same thing all offseason for Devin Singletary. It's like he's going to get all the work and nobody cares. Malik Nabers is going to get all the work and nobody cares. But Boone, I'm with you, man. I've got him as my wide receiver 19, my 30th overall player right now, and I can make a case to push him even higher. So I'm absolutely with you on this.
Boone, I got a question for you.
I love Devin Singletary as a Bills fan. I love Devin Singletary. I think he's very underrated. But I can get why the general perception from the public on Singletary has always been that he's never going to be an elite player. He's never going to be that league winner for you. So why even take him? I understand that. Malik Nabers, aren't we all in agreement that this guy is like a superstar talent? I mean, they're contacting players to get his jersey, to get the guy's jersey to let him wear number 1. Like, you don't do that for just anybody. So the team recognizes the talent. It seems like the fantasy community, for the most part, sees this guy as a potential elite receiver at some point. I guess it's got to be Daniel Jones, but I personally don't think Daniel Jones is bad enough that he's going to sink Malik Nabers. I think Malik Nabers is going to raise things up there, and the volume that he's going to get and the talent, that's what I'm looking for in fantasy. And it comes together for a guy who I think is easily going to be a top 20 receiver. And it would not surprise me at all if he's right there with Harrison, kind of vying for that back end wide receiver 1 range.
Boone, I got a question for you. Do you think it's also maybe the perception of, because he's the only exciting guy in the Giants offense, that from a defensive standpoint, it makes him really easy to potentially shut down or make it difficult? He is a rookie. There's always a rookie learning curve on top of the quarterback play, on top of the fact he's the focal point. Clearly, as you said, he's so clearly the focal point. Well, if I'm a defensive coordinator, all I'm saying is don't let Malik Nabers beat you. You're doubling him up. You're bracketing. You're doing everything you can to make sure he's not the guy hurting you. Do you think that is also having a negative impact too, the way people perceive it?
I mean, haven't we had players like this before that are like really, really strong talents that are able to overcome that? And I mean, Debro would be the better one to answer this. I mean, he's more of the NFL draft aficionado. Like, I think Nabers would be able to overcome that.
Well,
even
like DeAndre Hopkins, right, Debro? Like, that's a guy, bad quarterback play. Wasn't much around him in the Texans days. Like, that's the first guy that pops to mind for me. But there's been others.
Yeah, there's been others. I mean, here's the thing. If I were to tell you that Malik Nabers is going to get stuck on one side of the field on an island, they're not going to move him around, we got a buffoon calling plays and stuff, then I would feel much, much different about this. If you were to tell me, and this is one of the reasons I'm lower on Devontae Adams, if you were to tell me like Luke Getsy was coordinating this offense, then I'd be like, okay, never mind. Okay, we got to bump him down the ranks a little bit. But Brian Daboll is still a good coordinator. Like, everything that's gone wrong for the Giants, that could go wrong for the Giants, went wrong last year. And I think people are just too heavy on the Giants hate, and they're just trying to find reasons to fade the guy, when the real thing that they should be gravitating to is you draft players based off of situation, volume, and talent, and Malik Nabers has all of that.
All right, Debro, let's talk about the first guy on your list, because he's got a situation, he's got talent. He's also got a much lower ADP. So let's get into the guy that you think people should be paying attention to in this rookie class that maybe they're not.
Been talking about him the entire season ever since I saw him at Senior Bowl, man. And I'm a believer in the talent of Luke McCaffrey. And I added him to this list yesterday with the news of Brandon Ayuk signing and staying in San Francisco, because my biggest thing was I was afraid, and I didn't bump Luke up in the ranks. I didn't move anything around because I was afraid Brandon Ayuk was going to force his way to Washington. He ends up staying with the 49ers, and this creates the lane that I've wanted for Luke McCaffrey since he was drafted by the Washington Commanders. And people have slept on the talent. They said, okay, well, he's Christian's brother. That's why he went in the 3rd round. And I'm like, it's so dismissive. It's ridiculous. Like, he tested better than anybody gave him credit for. He has made huge leaps as a player and a wide receiver. And all of the stuff of, oh, well, he's raw. He can't play on the outside, blah, blah, blah. He's got a clear path to a starting role on this team. He's already cemented that. He's going to start in 3 wide receiver sets. And even the talent is getting dismissed, and I don't really understand it. Like, people say, well, can he line up outside? Can he beat man? Can he beat press? And I'm going to tell people that matters if you want to talk about absolute and total ceiling. But the other side of this, people will lose context about how the NFL operates and how NFL defenses operate right now. Like, we're talking about every single team, every team in the NFL utilizes zone coverage on at least 54% of the defensive snaps. 23 of the teams in the NFL utilize it on a 66 or higher percent clip. So why does this freaking matter? Why am I bringing this up? Because Luke McCaffrey last year, amongst 111 qualifying FBS wide receivers, Luke was 6th in receiving grade and 28th in yards per route run. He also plays with physicality. He is strong at the catch point. We're talking about a player that people are sleeping on the path to relevancy in fantasy and the talent, because they've already wanted to dismiss Jaden Daniels the entire offseason. They can't do it. They can't run away from him anymore. If we believe Jaden Daniels is good, I believe Luke McCaffrey could be one of the best values in drafts, especially from the rookie class.
Is it a slow play, though, with McCaffrey? Like, it feels like something that you might need patience for, where I don't know what his snap count's going to be. I don't know if you're going to see the De'Ami Browns of the world and those guys getting opportunities before McCaffrey, because he is a guy that did transition to this position, right? That was not his natural position, going into college. So do you think that patience is the best practice when it comes to McCaffrey?
Oh, he's a player that I think he's going to be playing a full-time starting role in week 1. Now, how much?
Wow. See, that's a lot, because some of the coach speak kind of alluded that it might not be the case. So that's kind of interesting that you think it could be that quickly.
I mean, who are we worried about? De'Ami Brown, who's never really done anything, who's been buried on the NFL depth chart. We're worried about Olamide Zaccheaus. Like, are these really players that we should be that concerned about? And I know they just signed Noah Brown. Noah Brown was really good for Houston last year. Outside of that, and I'm old enough to remember when Noah Brown was buried on the depth chart in Dallas. So again, we have a bunch of complementary players that can do good things for NFL rosters, but not high-end target earners, and yet we're so worried about Luke McCaffrey. I'm not.
Boone, the danger here is the last name. I think where people get a little excited and maybe overexcited. I've seen recently in drafts in the last 48 hours I've been in where McCaffrey all of a sudden just shot up huge in ADP. Have you seen that, and do you think it's something that is worth that risk? Or are there other guys, in that same rate? Like I've seen, Josh Palmer, Darnell Mooney, a lot of guys, Jalen McMillan, who I still like in that grouping. All of a sudden, McCaffrey's now popped up ahead of some of those. Do you see them in that same way? Or are you seeing McCaffrey as a guy that, as Derek said, could be more of a fantasy option earlier than even we anticipate?
I've been a little down on McCaffrey, but I respect Debro's opinion so much that even just being on the show and hearing him talk like that, I'll probably move him up in my next rankings update. How much I'll move him up, though, I'm not sure. And the reason is I don't expect that he's going to have this massive role early in the season. I do think it's going to be more of a slow play. So I think he's one of these rookies where you just wait. If someone drafts him, if they're very excited right now and they draft him, I guarantee he'll get dropped in a few weeks. And a lot of rookies that happens to, right? Especially guys that go in the later rounds. They don't do much in the first few weeks because sometimes rookies don't when they're not like star rookies. They get dropped, and that's when you go scoop them up. You get them for free. You get them off the waiver wire when you've sorted out your bench a little bit a few weeks into the season, and then let's see what he can become. Because as Debro said, the opportunity is certainly there for him. And now that Jahan Dotson's out of the way, I definitely think that McCaffrey can have a role this season. When that's going to happen is the only thing that maybe we disagree on, because I think it's going to take a little while.
Well, football is coming here in the NFL, but college football already started. You got the appetizer last week. Now it's time for the full meal. So don't miss any of the action over at DraftKings Sportsbook. It's a full slate of games for week 1 in college football, including the big matchup in Atlanta between the preseason number 1 and number 16. So it's really easy to get started if you never have at DraftKings. So go score big with DraftKings all college football season. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use that promo code FantasyPros. That's one word. Again, FantasyPros for new customers, and you get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Boone, let's crown another rookie who's going to be useful in fantasy, and you picked a Patriot? Do my eyes deceive me? Should I be excited? And no one's told me about my season as a fan?
I mean, you should have seen me on the Score NFL show, No Timeouts, yesterday. I was talking about how I think the Dolphins are going to be the last undefeated team this year. Not undefeated on the year, but they're going to be, 5-0, 6-0, 7-0 or whatever on the season. As a Bills fan, it was like breaking my heart, but we were making bold predictions. So this one might be a little bit bold, I guess, but to be able to get a player who I think can be his team's number 1 receiver this season. And again, it's something where, is it going to happen in week 1? Is it going to take a few weeks for him to take on that role? Because they were certainly slow playing it in the preseason, right? They were taking their rookies and really giving them limited playing time and kind of working them in behind some of the veterans. But Polk's a player that, this is a guy that went early second round. He might not have like the speed to be like a top end NFL receiver, an elite NFL receiver, but he's got great hands. He's really, really versatile. And they don't have much. It goes back to what Debro was saying about Washington, right? Like, who's in his way there? I think Debro likes Javon Baker, another rookie. Seems like he's going to maybe take a little bit of time. And then it's KJ Osborne and Demario Douglas and Tyquan Thornton. Like, who is really standing in Polk's way? They took him for a reason where they did. He is, in my mind, going to be the number one guy. And you can get him with a wide receiver 66, 176th overall. There's zero risk whatsoever. I have him 129th overall. I don't normally take receivers late in drafts. That's the funny part of this episode. Like my builds, I'm normally going running back at that phase. But if I am going to take a shot on somebody late, Polk is the kind of guy that I would do it with because he could emerge as the lead target getter, even if it is an offense that people aren't that excited about. It can't be worse than last year.
I think the only thing standing in Polk's way is Polk, probably. That is a wide receiver core of who's who. And by who's who, I mean who? Who do you have out there? Debro, you've had some love for Pop Douglas. You've had some love for Baker. Do you share any of Boone's love for Polk? Because he was the guy that they spent the most draft capital on this past year at the position.
I think targeting this receiver room, expecting somebody to emerge is the right approach. Now, I think we could all parse between the names and especially the young guys. Demario Douglas, we're going to talk about him here in a little bit. Dramatic foreshadowing. Jalen Polk and Javon Baker are the three names that I think people need to be circling on their draft boards. And depends, it's kind of a pick your flavor situation. Who do you believe in? Who do you believe in the prospect? Who do you believe in the profile? Or do you want to believe in the second year breakout? But again, this all comes down to I'm not worried about Tyquan Thornton. I'm not worried about KJ Osborne. This feels like a situation where the Patriots are making the rookies earn it. And so, again, with a slow burn type of situation, I think one of these guys, and it could be Polk, one of these guys is going to emerge from this passing attack and be a really, really strong value this year.
All right. I mean, if he was a productive player in college and he was playing with Rome Odunze and Jalen McMillan, those guys are getting a ton of praise in training camp in the preseason, right? And Polk has been too from the beat writers in New England. So, like I said, not somebody that I'm breaking the bank to get, but certainly a guy that I'll target if I am needing a receiver in the late rounds.
Debro, a guy that I don't think any of us would argue the talent is there. The questions about the next guy we're going to talk about really remain about the character of the player, which does enter into things sometimes. Like, is he a guy that's going to, endear himself to the coaching staff, to his teammates? Is he going to be a guy that, we've seen a lot of great talents in the NFL never be able to come to fruition because of some of the other issues? And this guy had issues at Alabama. But Jermaine Burton is a guy I know you and I agree on wholeheartedly. And we think, hey, this is the insurance blanket for if Chase should go down, if T. Higgins should go down at some point or get moved on from next year. But why can Jermaine Burton be useful this season in 2024? Does an injury have to happen, especially since Yoshi Voss could be a guy that's working ahead of him too to start the year?
I think that an injury, first of all, an injury doesn't have to happen for him to be relevant. He just needs to earn the wide receiver 3 role for Cincinnati. And we've heard in the offseason, and this is why I kind of bumped him down in my ranks a little bit, but I'm back in and I have to bring him up here because I think that he's going to have to prove himself and he's going to have to earn the wide receiver 3 role. Now, how long that takes, that could be week 1, that could be week 6, week 7. But what I'm saying is you need to draft him right now because as we stand right now, and then watch, by the time this goes live, look, Jamar Chase is going to get signed. But as we're recording this right now, Jamar Chase is still not signed. He is still holding out. And we don't know if he's going to play week 1. So we could be talking about a situation where Jermaine Burton is starting in 3 wide receiver sets in week 1 if Chase doesn't play. But assuming Chase does sign and he plays week 1, then yes, we need Burton to earn the wide receiver 3 role. And I know that people are going to watch this and going to say, oh, Burton was running with the 2s and 3s the entire preseason. I understand that. But I went back and watched all of his routes in the preseason on all 22. And the things that you want Burton to do is, if he's playing with the 2s and the 3s, is to look like the best player on the field the entire time. And he did that the entire preseason, dusting NFL corners, showing route nuance. And if you want to stack them up side by side, Burton and Yoshivas, I think Burton is handily the better wide receiver. He's a better route runner. He's strong at the catch point. He has so many skills. And again, he showed this in the preseason amongst 122 qualifying wide receivers in the preseason. He was top 5 in receiving grade and yards per route run. So this is a situation where we need to invest in talent. And we want to talk about, okay, we're investing in not only just a talented wide receiver, but a really good offense. And the cheapest piece of the offense, basically, you can get who could be a full-time starter. I'm not going to be surprised if we're sitting at week 11, week 12, and Jermaine Burton, we're consistently ranking inside the top 36 wide receivers on a weekly basis with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, because Burrow is lighting it up and on the way to possible MVP campaign.
I like it. I like where your head's at. I got some dynasty shares of Burton already, so I'm excited about everything you said. Now, before we move on to the sophomore class, since we've done the freshman already, I want to tell you about a new product that's out there too, because summer is heading into the bottom of the ninth, but football season is around the corner, so no more baseball metaphors. We're on to football. Don't lose those high summer vibes, and don't let them just stay on the bench. Change the game and elevate your everyday with Via. Via gives you the freedom to blaze your own trail and get fully legal hemp and cannabis products discreetly shipped to your door in all 50 states. The new training schedule hitting you hard. Via's Relief line, designed to support your relaxation and restoration, is the ideal companion to level up your post-gym recovery and alleviate those aches and pains from years on the field. I know D-Bro's got a lot of years on that field. Via's organic flower is grown carefully and rigorously tested to ensure the highest quality, free from harsh pesticides or nasty chemicals, and Via is also well-renowned for their award-winning THC and THC-free gummies, premium indoor THC flower, soothing tropicals, and calming drops, all crafted with the highest quality hemp source from trusted independent-owned farmers. So, trusted by a number of professional athletes as well, at the top of their game, over 500,000 customers already, can't be wrong. Via is the brand that everyone's raving about. So if you're 21 or over, check out the link to Via's website on the description. You get 15% off right here. Again, go click on that bad boy. Try Via for the first time. And D-Bro, you are a fan of the Via as well. A full endorsement from D-Bro on the Via. And it doesn't get better than that, right, Derek?
Oh, dude, these gummies have been awesome and just a good product, man. I will say one thing. These flow state gummies are fantastic as far as like mental clarity. And as I'm trying to craft the week 1 primer right now, I've been popping one every morning, and it's been really helping as far as just staying focused throughout the day.
There you go. Focused, clear heads, full hearts, all the Via. Can't lose. All right, let's get to all of it here. Let's start with some of the sophomore class here. Boone, first guy on your list is a guy I keep talking about because I don't think he is getting suspended in 2024 at least. And it seems like you must think the same, yet everybody is still freaking out and the ADP continues to sit there, maybe lower than it should be.
Yeah, and this is one where, by the end of, next week when the regular season starts, I'm sure the ADP will be up maybe another round, maybe another 2 rounds, because I think people are coming around to it. There was a report yesterday, that the NFL is going to wait on this, that they're going to wait until it's resolved. And shout out to Drew Davenport, a football guys, and the auction brief. A great legal analyst when it comes to this stuff. He does excellent work. Everybody should be following him. He's kind of been on this all off season, and he gives all the potential outcomes and then sort of throws his take in there. And he sort of suggested that this is one that could get pushed back to 2025. That really seems like it's going to be the case. And that's the only reason that I see why his ADP was any lower, right? When you look at what Rashee Rice did last season, emerging as the year went on, it took a little bit of time, right? We're talking about a player who was the wide receiver 16 in fantasy points per game last year from week 7 on. And that was when he consistently started playing more than 50% of the snaps. This year, I think Travis Kelce and the team's going to be smart about trying to keep him healthy for the playoffs. So I'm expecting his numbers to come down a little bit. Hollywood Brown, not healthy going into the season. When's he going to be 100% and ready to go? I like Xavier Worthy, but I think this is going to be Rashee Rice's receiving core. He is going to be atop that depth chart, and this guy's going to be a great player. I mean, he's going as the wide receiver 32, 73rd overall. I have him as the wide receiver 23, 38th overall in my rankings. So we're like cutting that almost in half.
Yeah, he's a low-end wide receiver 2 for me too. And I think anybody who's been drafting early, as I know the 3 of us have been feverishly, we've been getting those cheap shares of Rice. I do think you're right, though. This coming weekend, that last draft weekend coming up there last week here in these last few days, maybe, just maybe, you see it rise a little bit over the next 48 hours. D-Bro, let's get to another sophomore on your list too, because this guy had some big games last year. Unfortunately, he was asked to block, which I don't know why that happened, but it kind of ruined everyone's good feelings about Tank Dell. But why should we be back on that horse again in 2024 now that Stefon Diggs is also in town?
By the dip, man. I mean, we saw him crush last year, and now you're getting him at such a wonderful price point in drafts because everybody's so worried about Stefon Diggs. And if you want to poke holes in this receiving room and you want to say, okay, who are the guys we need to have the most concern about? Nico Collins, we saw him ball out last year. Like, he was basically Brandon Ayuk in Houston. We saw Tank Dell hit the ground running as T.Y. Hilton 2.0 last year. And then you have Stefon Diggs enter the room, and he's had 2 back-to-back disappointing seasons where he is cratered down the stretch, and he's another year older, and we always worry about wide receivers switching teams. So why in the heck are we letting Tank Dell be the 3rd Houston wide receiver drafted? I have no clue, but I'm not going to stand for it. I'm not standing for it, considering what he did in his rookie season. In the 7 games we got Dell and Nico on the field together, Tank Dell outproduced Nico Collins. You want to talk about target share, beat him in target share, air yard share, weighted opportunity, and fantasy points per game. He scored 18.7 PPR points per game, which surpassed Nico Collins in that 7-game stretch. Invest in talent, and if you don't believe me, listen to any clip out there of CJ Stroud talking about Tank Dell. And if you don't believe me, go listen to the quarterback that's determining who's getting targets and who's not.
They asked CJ Stroud to make like his elite offense of, all the players in the league, and he put Tank Dell on there. I don't think he put any other teammates on there, but he put Tank Dell on there. And like Debro said, last year before he got hurt, he was a wide receiver 1 in fantasy points per game. That's how good this guy is. Yeah, I still have him 2nd behind Nico Collins. But yeah, I have Diggs as the 3rd. And as the Bills fan, I'm going to say, like, I worry what's going to happen when Stefon Diggs isn't getting a ton of targets early in the season. If they're winning, maybe it'll be okay. But he's a guy that wants the ball. And when that doesn't happen in the first few weeks, because they have a lot of options, is that going to become a problem?
Question for you. Boone, would you rather have Rashee Rice or Stefon Diggs this year?
Oh, Rashee Rice, not even close.
Okay.
Yeah, not even close. I have Diggs as my wide receiver 30 at the moment.
80 people disagree with us. Consensus disagrees with us. But I think all 3 of us see that the same way. So that's a very interesting one. So keep that in your brain when it's coming around to you in those certain rounds where Diggs is there. You can get Rice probably a round or even more later. Let's go back to you, Boone, for another sophomore you think is primed to have a good year, because the next guy you're going to talk about got off to a tough start with some injuries. And I think that kind of set the tone for maybe a disappointing 2023, but things might be looking up for this next guy this season.
Yeah, that's really easy to forget that Jaxon Smith-Njigba was a broken wrist or forearm, depending what you want to say. That happened in August last year. That's tough for any rookie, even a first-round receiver. He goes into the season. You already know he was going to play behind DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett in year 1, and he was going to have to fight for work in that offense. But then as the year went along, people also might forget that he started to do some things, right? He scored double-digit fantasy points in 6 of his last 12 games. He flashed. There was plenty of highlights during that time. I remember 1 touchdown that got called back. He had a lot of moments last year, and just because he was a bit of a disappointment versus what people thought he might do at the beginning of the season, I think the fantasy community kind of went too far the other way on him. But this season, Tyler Lockett's going to be 32. Tyler Lockett has a leg injury going into the year. He's a little bit banged up in the summer here. So maybe he's the one that's dealing with the injury now, and we'll see JSN pass him. The new coaching staff seems to absolutely love JSN. They've said nothing but nice things. The beat writers are talking about how much work that he's been getting, how many targets in practice. And you just look at the kind of player that this guy is. I'm expecting that he is going to emerge. It was only a matter of time. And last year, yes, he had these 2 other guys that he had to pass. I think this is the year that he's going to pass Lockett now. Right now, he's a 102 overall in terms of ADP. I have him 76th overall. I think he could be a wide receiver 3. I think he could potentially have wide receiver 2 upside, depending how much of a step back Lockett has this year. I think it's a slam dunk. And Debro, I'm sorry that I stole him from you again here. Normally, every time we talk about this, I want to bring up JSN. You don't get the chance to. In our International Dynasty League, I'm hoarding him. I won't trade him to you.
I keep sending offers, Boone, and you keep rejecting them.
This Ryan Grubb offense, it's going to be more explosive. All the players are excited now about this downfield potential that they have. And I think JSN is going to have a great year.
Well, it makes a lot of sense too, because I mean, this is a player that had a big pedigree, came from, wide receiver university in Ohio State. Everybody loved him last year. And sometimes it does take a year. I don't think people really paid enough attention to the injury last year. And the fact that Lockett's another year older and starting the year hurt Debro, to me, that's the thing that's shot JSN up my boards, and the new coaching staff. Because you can't imagine at this stage too, new coaching staff is looking at these veterans that are hanging on. I could even see them moving on from Tyler Lockett, like at the trade deadline, of somebody saying, hey, we could use some wide receiver help and go take Tyler Lockett from us because we've got JSN now. I could even see that scenario playing out there. But JSN, you guys are both on him. And I think that's important, Debro. When you have a lot of smart analysts who are on the same player, that's something to take note of.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll double down on what Boone said. I've got JSN as my 69th overall player, wide receiver 35. I want to, and I've been I had a consensus the entire offseason. The big thing that I want people to take away from when you look at the context of JSN's season last year, there is no way, shape, form, or fashion that Jaxon Smith-Njigba should have been used as a screen merchant. There is no way. And just to contextualize this for people, 52.3% of his targets last year were screens. He had the 7th most screens amongst all wide receivers. And again, highlighting here that he missed time. So I don't know what Shane Waldron thought he was doing, but it was horrible. We get the actual usage we should have gotten last year for JSN this year in a better offense. With Seattle, I mean, look, I've been talking about them all offseason. I love this offense. I want to invest in all parts or pieces. I think that they're going to do smart things, play action, motion, and utilizing players in the roles that they should be in. So yes, fully invest in JSN this year.
All right, there you have it. Back to you real quick for one more Debro that you have on your list. And I can't believe you guys have both picked Patriots too. Like, I feel like you guys are kind of tweaking me. Like, you're kind of like trying to make me more excited. Like, I could not be more excited
for the season we're at, right? We're trying to dig deeper here. We've talked about these guys so much for the last few months.
I'm very excited super excited for the NFL season. This is what we all live for. As a Patriot fan, I'm less excited, less enthusiastic. But now we're talking about another Patriot wide receiver, Debro, Pop Douglas. I have some shares. I'm not going to lie. I kind of, self-loathing a little bit, maybe, perhaps. But why is Pop Douglas the one for you this year who, as a sophomore, could really finally realize some potential?
Because he's the only wide receiver in that room that's actually proven on the NFL stage that he can earn volume. And as much as we like the rookies there, he proved it last year. He came out of nowhere last year, and as soon as he was a starter, we got 8 games of him playing over 50% of the snaps. In that stretch, he led the team commanding almost a 21% target share, a 24.4% first read share. He was a wide receiver 3 or better in 5 of those 8 games. And if anybody had him and they played him and you plugged him into your flex last year, as well as I do, he was allergic to touchdowns. If you throw any touchdowns on top of the production that he had last year, we are talking about Pop Douglas would have had multiple wide receiver 2 weeks, and people would look at him in a much different light. And we know the other thing about it is we know that out of that wide receiver room, he will be a starting wide receiver from the word go. We're making projections for Jalen Polk and Javon Baker. We still like him. I know that Pop Douglas is going to be a starter, and I've already seen him produce in the NFL, and people need to invest in him.
I think Jacoby Myers was also, if memory serves, his predecessor who was allergic to touchdowns. Maybe just the Patriots are allergic to touchdowns at this point in the game. Maybe that's what I'm starting to think about here.
Hopefully Alex Van Pelt has an EpiPen in his pocket. And he's like, no, not 2024.
Thank God for Red Zone. I don't have to watch too much of it sometimes. All right, let's get to the third year, guys. And there's a player on your list, Derek, that I am drafting, super high. I will do almost, and I mean almost anything to draft this player, and his name is Christian Watson. I just took him in our little league 2 right before the show started in our little content team draft. He is my wide receiver 3. Yes, I did, my friend. So let's talk about why you would do almost anything here for Christian Watson.
I'm pulling up this draft room, and he was the guy that was at the top of my queue. So I almost want to walk off the show right now, but I can't do it.
I'm sure
so
Boone
I guess
mind, but
Oh, yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But Dude, we've been talking about Christian Watson the entire offseason, and the fact remains is that we've seen the talent in spurts. Now, if he can stay healthy, and I know people still want to make all their injury jokes. Look, all your injury jokes are tired. Nobody's laughing. But you will be laughing at all your league mates if you draft Christian Watson this year and he goes out and he blows up. And I think it's firmly within the range of outcomes that he could be this year's Nico Collins.
Ooh,
if he does that, we're talking about a low-end wide receiver one. If everybody says, come on, man, like you're just throwing out stuff that doesn't even make sense. We didn't see Jordan Love playing amazing football for the entirety of the season. We got a 2-game sample, people, where Christian Watson was reasonably healthy and Jordan Love was playing lights out football. In that 2-game sample, he commanded almost a 24% target share. He had 3.0 yards per route run, and he was averaging 24 fantasy points per game. I understand it's a 2-game sample. Look, guy's going to go to the moon this year. Just draft him and enjoy.
I agree. And there you have it, everybody. That's the guy that we give up almost anything to draft. It's Christian Watson. And of course, don't forget about Uber Eats this football season, because that's the way you get pretty much anything delivered to your house. Almost anything. One might even say for your game day, you get it delivered with Uber Eats, the official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order right now over at Uber Eats. All right, I want to order something from you, Boone. Give me a third-year wide receiver that you think is going to have a good fantasy season that we can get excited about.
I think it's Khalil Shakir. And again, I'm going to preface this by saying I don't normally take receivers late, but there's a couple guys that I will target in that range. And I want to go after guys that could potentially have a lot of volume in their offense. And right now, the Bills receiving core, it's kind of up in the air, right? Like Keon Coleman, an interesting rookie, but a guy that I think we could probably agree is going to take some time to get acclimated to the pros, and the team has kind of acknowledged that already. Curtis Samuel, I actually like better than Shakir, but he's got a turf toe injury. That's kind of scary for a receiver, and especially the kind of receiver he is that's going to win in short yardage and needs those kind of quicks if he's going to be lining up out of the backfield and everything. So a little bit worried about him to start the season. And Shakir last year, people will want to point to so far in his career, the metrics maybe overall have not been great. But if you look at last season and you break it down at the beginning of the year where he wasn't even playing 40% of the snaps over the first 7 weeks, right? From week 8 on, the playing time bumped right up. He was playing about 3/4 of the snaps at that point, and he led the team in receiving during that span, right? So this season coming in, I think Dalton Kincaid has the best chance to lead them in targets, but I think Shakir has a shot to lead that receiving core in targets, and to get him where you can get him 127th overall, we're talking about the 11th round. Again, if I'm going to take a shot on a guy in that range, I want a guy that could potentially end up being the number 1 receiver in his receiving core, and it's a long shot like anybody at that point in the draft, but Shakir has a chance.
I want to ask the guy in the Bills hat this question. Who's a better return on investment in ADP? Is it Keon Coleman? Or is it Shakir where he's being drafted?
It's probably Shakir, to be honest. And I'm hoping that Keon Coleman can have like that Rashee Rice kind of season where in the first month or so, he's kind of learning. And then maybe the second half of the year, he starts to come on a little bit. But I think the way the Bills are going to do this is they're going to focus on Dalton Kincaid being a focal point of that passing attack. And then they're going to spread the ball around to everybody else and just hope that one of these guys emerges. And that's why I think you should place a chip on the cheapest option, which is Shakir.
All right, let's go to another player on your list, D-Bro, another guy that I'm getting really comfortable drafting to. ADP, I think, is a little lower than it should be. I don't care who's playing quarterback in Pittsburgh. I think George Pickens, like you, is a good investment.
Yes, I think he can be a good investment. Now, I'm going to give the bull case for George Pickens, but then I want to open this up to the floor because I want to play devil's advocate here because I've had a hard time ranking him the entire offseason and call this fear and loathing of Arthur Smith because it's real. I have been burned. We have all been burned. We have seen what he has done to wide receivers. Drake London, hello. In previous years.
Is that what he did, or is that what the quarterbacks did?
Let's exactly. I think that's a huge part.
Now we can copy and paste that maybe to Pittsburgh a little bit.
A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
Right. Okay, let's go.
The upside case is easy to see, and we saw this last year. I mean, without Deontay Johnson, weeks 2 through 5, George Pickens was the wide receiver 16. He was gobbling up a 27% target share. So the upside case is easy to see for him. My worries when we're discussing George Pickens is what's the passing volume? What's the quarterback play? And Boone, I'm going to toss this to you, man. Like, how do you feel about George Pickens? Because he's going as a wide receiver 3 right now. I see the upside case, and I'm making it here. I'm also worried about the downside case. I mean, where do you sit at on Pickens?
I really like him. I've liked him as a talent since he came out. I have him right at that low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 range. I don't know my rankings in front of me, so I'm not sure exactly which spot, but I think he's going to pay off this year. The only reason I had him a couple spots lower is because we were potentially worried that the Ayuk trade could go through, and that would have been a big problem for him. And then I would have had way more concerns about the Arthur Smith stuff and who are we going to be throwing the ball to. But who else are they going to throw the ball to in this offense? If you look at the preseason, even Pat Fryermuth at tight end, who I thought would have a shot, they're using a big time rotation at tight end there. Mm-hmm. Maybe that was because it was the preseason, but that kind of tracks with what Arthur Smith has done in the past. So Pickens, to me, has a good shot to return value because Russell Wilson, as much as he is not the Russell Wilson of old, he's not Desmond Ridder, who can't even win the number 2 job on the Cardinals, right? Like, Desmond Ridder was providing some of the worst quarterback play that we saw. He was not the answer. And I'm not using that to defend Arthur Smith, but I agree with Joe that I think that was a huge reason why the offense in Atlanta wasn't paying off. So I really like Pickens this year. And we saw Russell Wilson last year. He could lock onto a target and throw a bunch of touchdowns to Cortland Sutton. Why can't Pickens be that guy this year?
Yeah, and if it does become Fields at some point too, I'm pretty confident. We saw, he locked into DJ Moore, the same mindset. Like, these guys are capable of sustaining far better productivity in an Arthur Smith offense than the previous quarterbacks in Atlanta. If that was the fear and loathing part, I think that you should leave behind a little bit. Here's a question for you though. Pickens or T. Higgins, boys? Because those guys typically go right around the same point. Pickens is the number 1 on his team. T. Higgins is clearly not when Jamar Chase is around. So Boone, do you have, you're looking for a wide receiver, you're up in the draft. Typically those guys are right in that same cluster. Who would you take?
I have Pickens several spots higher, and there's a few reasons. I don't want to suggest that T. Higgins will be one of these guys that if he gets some injuries in a contract year, because it really seems like they're not going to sign him to a contract. I think a Chase deal will get done. I don't think Higgins will get a deal in Cincy, and I think that's why they took Jermaine Burton, and I think Jermaine Burton's a great pick for 2025. I like him a lot more in Dynasty than I do in redraft, Ebro, not to bring that one back up. But those are some of my concerns with Higgins. Great player, can certainly produce when he's out there, but later in the season, some of these guys like Josh Jacobs last year, they get a little banged up. They're looking for a contract in the offseason. They're going to be a free agent. Will they sit some games that otherwise maybe they wouldn't have? That's total speculation. That's not something you should base all your draft decisions on. But when you're comparing him where he's the number 2 on the team to Pickens, where he's the clear number 1 and really has 0 target competition, I'm going Pickens. I'm several spots higher.
Same for you, D?
No, I'll take T. Higgins. And I think they're living in the same area code. And I think it depends on how you look at both situations. I think you can make the absolute upside case is definitely in Pickens' favor. Again, maybe this is just my worries about Pickens and the quarterback play and Arthur Smith. But I think investing in T, and I have him above Pickens in my ranks, is just taking another part of a really good offense that's going to throw at probably a top 5 clip. And I think this is honestly the healthiest we've seen Joe Burrow walking into any NFL season. I mean, it's not just, the ACL. We can all remember, the dude had a ruptured appendix, lost weight and stuff, and missed time in other training camps. So I think we get a healthy Joe Burrow, and I would invest in T. Higgins over George Pickens.
One more guy to get to here. Boone, close us out with a guy this year in their 3rd season that could break out.
I'm going so deep on this one. All the other guys have been people that everybody knows. This one, I bet there might be some people out there that aren't even on him at all. Jalen Tolbert on the Cowboys, going to be the Cowboys' number 3 receiver. Like I said, this is a complete Hail Mary on this one. But the Cowboys, despite saying that they were going to go out and they were going to get people and they were going to go all in this year, they didn't, right? They didn't really add much to that offense in terms of the passing attack and the skill position talent. We're not going to get into the backfield and how they really don't have a backfield this season, but that's another reason to be in on their passing game. So it's CeeDee Lamb. He is a god. It's Brandon Cooks, who I actually think is a pretty good value in fantasy drafts right now. He was the wide receiver 25 for a good chunk of last season. And that was the chunk of last season from week 6 on when the Cowboys really figured out what they had to be. They were going to be this pass offense. Dak was the number one fantasy quarterback from week 6 on. CeeDee Lamb was the number one fantasy wide receiver from week 6 on. They are one of the pass heaviest teams in the league. They're going to do it again. And so it will probably take an injury for Tolbert to truly break out. But I think he is going to have some games this year. I think he's going to be a usable fantasy option at times. And if we see an older, he's going to be 31, I think, during the season, Brandon Cooks get dinged up or start to slow down a little bit, Tolbert all of a sudden could step up and be the number 2 in one of the better pass offenses in the league. So I think he's a name to remember and somebody that the beat writers, again, I keep going back to this, but they constantly highlight him as somebody who's making plays in camp and is coming along. And I think if the opportunity presents itself this year, if he can get into a bigger role, I think he's a guy that could give you something and could be a fantasy starter.
I actually have some shares in deeper leagues of Jalen Tolbert, so I was very happy when you selected him to discuss today. D-Bro, look, somebody else has got to step up here in this offense too. We don't know what the running back situation really is going to look like as the season develops on. CeeDee Lamb was unbelievable for the Cowboys last year, but somebody else has to step up besides Ferguson. Can Tolbert be that guy for you?
I hope so. I loved him as a prospect. And I think the big thing for Tolbert is, one, coming out of a really small school and his player archetype. Like, he's not a separation specialist. He's a late separation guy. Very much, if you want to contextualize in your mind's eye of the type of wide receiver that Jalen Tolbert is or could be. I mean, we're talking about a guy that's very T. Higgins-esque, very Marvin Jones-esque, where the catch point can be muddy, so you're expecting him to win those balls at the catch point, but he's a late separation guy. So some of that, if you're coming from a small school, the huge increase in competition, sometimes it just takes time for some guys. And I don't want to be totally out on Tolbert this year because, again, the rest of this passing offense behind CeeDee Lamb is very meh level. Like Brandon Cooks, Jake Ferguson, are we really worried about them? Like, okay, they're okay, but they're not amazing. So you're talking about an avenue on a team that we do expect to throw the ball a ton. Can Tolbert step up this season? I think it's definitely possible.
There you go. So that's a great look, everybody, at some rookies, some second-year guys, some third-year guys, players that are going to help your fantasy team in 2024. Drop your comments below. Which one are you drafting the most shares of? You got strong feelings about Pickens or Christian Watson? We want to hear from you. Again, don't forget to subscribe to the Fantasy Pros podcast, wherever you get your pods. And don't forget to ring that bell on the YouTube channel when you subscribe there as well, so you don't miss any of the action here. All the podcasts are here. We also have the live streams here as well. D-Bro and Joey P will be back again for another glorious season. They're giving us more time, folks. I know you asked for it, you got it. And if you didn't ask for it, it's too bad. You're getting it anyway. So hope you enjoy it. So we're going to be live here on the channel. We got the live streams to help you with start, sit, waiver wire ads, all the pods, all the short form videos, and all the amazing people like Justin Boone who take time out of their busy schedule on a holiday weekend to join us. Boone, enjoy the break before the storm. And D-Bro, well, I'll see you probably tomorrow. That'll do it for us. But the story of the game goes on. For D-Bro and Boone, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.